We seem, are we on? Oh, yeah.
We are on. Welcome, my friends. Welcome to today's event. This is International Innovation, Humanitude. We are waiting for a few more folks to join us. We have about 89 folks on the call. We have about 171 people registered today. We're very excited that people all across the United States are very eager to learn about what is going on throughout Europe and Asia to make a better life for people with dementia and people with all kinds of frailty. Hello, Pamela. I see your hand up. Thanks for waving there. If you have any questions, go ahead and chat to us in the chat feature. So my name is Benjamin Sermi. I'm a social gerontologist and director of people and culture for Kelsch. My contact info is there if you'd like to get a hold of me after this event. Quick thank you to the Kelsch family for sponsoring this event. Alice and Emmett Kelsch, back in the 1950s, they sold everything they had to buy an abandoned nursing home in Kelso, Washington. They wanted to start a family business, do something that fit their values. And so they bought this abandoned nursing home and began raising their children in the basement of the nursing home and taking care of elders right there. America's very first assisted living was built by the Kelsch family, or at least one of the very first in the nation. And this is Delaware Plaza in Longview, Washington. And they wanted to create a new way for elders to live rather than the traditional nursing home, but instead a way that was a real home where people had their privacy, their dignity, had freedom of opportunity, and created one of the very first. This is the Kelsch family, and Aaron Kelsch is their oldest son, and he and his wife Judy and their children run, operate, manage Kelsch communities in 8 different states, 32 plus, with 7 more being built. So we want to say thank you to them. They build reminiscing features in all of their retirement communities for people with dementia, and then they have all kinds of amazing independent living communities that are just great places to thrive. So thank you to the Kelsch family for sponsoring today. Also want to let everybody know we are giving away the Caregivers Care Package this month. You can enter a drawing after this to win this. It's designed by a licensed family therapist who's created a way to help keep people who are caring for someone else, help them find balance, help them take care of themselves in the midst of what they're going through. They also have the Caregivers Care Journal, which helps a caregiver who's caring for someone at home stay balanced and find some balance in their life. What you'll do is just go to this address afterwards, livingwellevents.org/insights. And if there's any resources that our guest will be giving away today, any kind of PDFs or information, this is how you'll get it, by going to this address after the event, filling out the quick form, and we'll send you those things afterward, as well as a recording from today's experience. And that's also how you'll enter the drawing. Now, before I go any further, I do have a message from my folks in Illinois. I have received information that many of you in Illinois are trying to get CEUs for this event. If that is the case, please reach out to ElderWorks. ElderWorks is the organization who is giving the CEU for this event. You do need to be here for the entire event, and you need to make sure that you're in touch with ElderWorks after this event is over. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest from today. This is João Pärtel Araújo, and he is a licensed nurse. He has his healthcare management master's degree. He's a published researcher, international trainer. He's the pedagogical coordinator for Humanitude, and he's also a school founder. And John and I met last year when I invited John to the United States to do some pilot projects in the state of Washington. And maybe I'll get a chance to share a little bit about that later, but it was such an amazing experience. We did 2 more pilots together and finished our 4th training just a few weeks ago, right before all the stay-at-home orders started. And we have been so impressed with the results of the protocols that John and his team have put together over 40 years, that we have invited him to come and speak to healthcare providers, hospitals, clinics, geropsych units, memory care centers, home care agencies across the United States, because what they're doing in Europe and in Asia is fundamentally different than some of the things we're doing here in the United States. And we need to borrow and take some from what they're doing. So without further ado, John, please take it away. Hold on,
Here
John.
I
You're
am.
on. There we
Now
go.
yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. A long time away, a long distance away, but but we'll all keep it up with it. It's a bit strange to do it like this because we're talking about relationship and we're talking about personal and eye to eye, and doing it technologically becomes a bit strange to me. But I hope I reach out to everybody. I hope the quality of the sound and image is good enough for this to be effective. If you have any questions, if you need any extra in detail of what I'm saying, please let me know through the chat or through the question and answer. I think Benjamin will help me with that kind of management. But hopefully, I hope I'll reach out to everybody in the same way with quality. If not, let me know. So I set up a presentation to kind of guide me. Otherwise, I'll just ramble about this, and it's good to have kind of a structured thought. Humanitude came to me by chance. So back in 2006, my grandfather was diagnosed with vascular dementia, and we struggled to find appropriate care for him. So, and when I mean appropriate care, was something that we could actually feel that we were helping him in some sorts, not seeing him deteriorate gradually over the years. And I was already a nursing student, and I couldn't actually find anything that fulfilled the wish of my wish and my family's wish. And eventually, we did see my grandfather pass away with very dependent on a bed. And I thought that this is not something that we could find as a solution for a lot of people that are coming up with this disease. So I went abroad and I went to look out to see what's happening around the world. And when I reached to Ireland, it's just a small personal story. I think it kind of clears the context. I went to Ireland to work for a couple of years, and when I reached out, they were actually implementing a whole regulation and quality criteria into all the nursing facilities and all the communities for the elderly people. And I was involved in implementation of those regulations. And after all that, we realized that the quality was just bureaucratic, was just records. The quality of care, in fact, was the same. All we do now is we have more protocols and we have more records. So a friend of mine was working in Switzerland, and he did mention to me about Humanitude, that this was actually making a difference on people's lives. So I heard about a conference of Yves Gineste, one of the authors, and I went to meet him. And by the time I met him, I saw this presentation, also very similar to what I'm doing today. And in an hour, he showed what was all the goods and the prettiness of Humanitude, but it all sounded too wonderful to me. So I went to him to say, like, okay, this is all very pretty, but how do you do it? Because this is not the care context that I know. And he told me that if I go to France, he could show me, and I did. So I went to France. I had the opportunity to study directly with the authors, with Yves Gineste and Josette Mariscotti. They were very kind to me. They took me in like a friend, like a family. And if I'm here today, it's due to them. So I was very impressed with the results that I saw, and I realized that this is something that I could see myself doing as a caregiver. So Humanitude was developed by Yves Gineste and Josette Mariscotti. They are actually two caregivers, but self-made caregivers. They're not professionally trained. Their background is education. They're physical education teachers. Back in the 70s, they were invited by a hospital to go and help the caregivers to transfer people, because the caregivers were having a lot of back injuries, and they had a training on ergonomy in body mechanics, and they were invited by this hospital to see if there was anything they could do to help them. But when they arrived to the care context back in the 70s, they said that this was not at all what they were expecting. They said that they could hear two kind of screams, the screaming from the patient and the screaming from the caregivers, because they were all so upset with each other. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And as young professionals, they did not see themselves making a difference in that care context. So they stuck around, but they didn't do much at the beginning. They just took the advantage of being there to observe. And they say that nowadays this was their big advantage, because they were actually never filtered. They were never actually cultured to be caregivers. They were just people that were coming in from the outside, the outer world, and realized that things weren't working out, and they dared to challenge that. because they weren't part of that culture, they weren't part of that system. So gradually they started to implement little changes. So at the beginning was something very body, because they were about to transfer people, so positioning people. So they started off using their body mostly. But they realized that there are certain manners for us to transfer people that are more useful than others. And first of all is, if we ask anyone what is the easiest way to transfer someone, if you ask a caregiver, they're going to ask you that you need to position yourself in a certain manner, you need to have this handle, that handle, whatnot. But they realized the easiest way to transfer anyone is to ask them. And of course, this is kind of a silly realization, but they realized that caregivers were very task orientated. I'm a caregiver, and I was taught the same way. We are ready to go. We roll up our sleeves and we get things done. But sometimes this is actually our own worst enemy, because we do not give time for people to do for themselves, and we're actually taking that burden for us caregivers, and that just creates a cycle of dependency. So the first thing they've realized is that people are not moving enough in a care context, and they come from a physical education background, and they realized their background taught them that if you move, you are healthy. If you don't move, you are unhealthy. So you have to keep moving. So the first thing they did was like, okay, sure, we need to keep people moving no matter what. So the first principle they came up with is the verticality, the live and die standing up. The more they do, the better. And this is interesting because then everything rolled up to a point that they realized that relationship is key to get people do anything, because people will not get up for you if you ask them in a rude manner. Because one way is to ask them, could you please stand up? The other way is to, hey, you, set up. That doesn't work so well with people. You know, humans are very particular in the way they address each other, and they realize that if you establish a good relationship with a person, it's much easier to get them to consent to cooperate with you. And if people are cooperating with you, it's much easier to transfer them. And so later on, they realized that the non-verbal communication is key, and verbal communication is key with patients for them to actually assist everybody and to facilitate care in this care context. So over the years, they've worked with great professionals. They say this, and I have that as experience, and I'm very thankful for Benjamin. He actually is to blame for me to be here, and Koelsch, of course, for trusting in us and believing in us. What we realize is that every time we come into a new context, we are faced with new challenges, but also with great solutions. Another thing that very often you don't hear about is how great and how inventive and how innovative caregivers can be. And actually, there's a lot of great care out there, but unfortunately, we tend to hear only about the worst case scenarios. But we are lucky enough to work with great people and great institutions and great organizations who actually do really good care, and we carry that with us to the next one. So over the years that we've been working with Humanitude, we've seen it all, really. And I was a kid back then. I was naive. I was ignorant. I'm still a bit naive. I'm still very much ignorant. Yes, believe me. But the truth is that this gives me the opportunity to realize that there are things out there that do work. From Singapore to Japan to France to Germany to Italy to Portugal to US, we see great care, and this is something that we try to keep up, and we try to carry on to the next organization that we go and train. Another thing that we do very particularly, and I like to emphasize that, is that our trainings are practical. So when we do some training, we tend to ask the caregivers what are their main challenges, and what are the people that they care for that they feel more challenged by, because there's care refusal, because they're difficult to transfer, they're very heavy, because they're just slowly fading away and they don't see a way to bring them back. And during our training, we try to come up with a personalized techniques for these people. We try to teach the caregivers the techniques that we have. And like this, we're always growing on it. We teach the techniques that we already have. We experiment new techniques. The caregivers teach me the techniques they use. And so every time we go into the next training session, we bring something more with us. And this is I'm very grateful for that. we're mainly focusing is how to make personalized care, how to make a more humane care. We have a couple of rules that we follow, and it's something that we need to focus, is that how can we provide a quality of care to our elderly to make sure that they feel like a person. This is what Humanitude is for. How to be more humane, how to be more dignifying, how to be closer to the patients that we care for every day. And the results we have with Humanitude, they can be quite surprising. Fortunately enough, research has come along nicely, because at the beginning, Humanitude was very empirical, was practice-based. So it was developed on the floor. And because of that, there was a lot of challenge, scientific challenges, because the professors, the academics were challenging us, saying that this is not real, that this is all made up stories. And unfortunately, we were lucky enough to have a lot of teams now, research teams from all over the world, from Japan. Japan is very strong on research, mind you, and they unfortunately they speak a language that only they understand. But it's coming a lot of nice results from there, very explanatory results, and validating what we're doing. So we can get less neuropsychiatric symptoms. We can get less chemical restraints, because after all, people do not refuse care and they do not agitate. We have a very high return on investment, and this is because the good quality of care actually has a great impact on the person, on the caregiver, on the organization, on the community, on the government, on the health system. And to do a professional excellence work actually comes a long way in economical terms. We reduce burnout from caregivers as well, because it's very tough to care for people who refuse care, for people who agitate, who can be combative. And fortunately enough, we have none of that with Humanitude. It's something that I need to tell you, is combativeness does not belong in care. With Humanitude, we have 0% of combativeness. It might be hard to believe, but Benjamin can testify for that. I'll show you some videos as well along this presentation to try to clarify that on you. And of course, we get other improvements, the well-being, to address people with in a more humane way, makes them feel better altogether, as we all know. One thing that I would like you to do, and I asked Benjamin to do that, I would like you to fill in a poll. So I would like you to think of the importance of gazing someone, looking into the eyes of someone. And for you, from 5 to 1, where 1 is not very important, so you shouldn't be gazing at people, you should be looking in the eye of the patients. And 5 is very important. Yes, you should be gazing and looking into the eyes of the patient every day, all the time. So I would like you to fill that in, just for fun. And when everybody's ready, we move on to the next question. So there you go. Very important. This is typical, because we are humans. We know the importance of nonverbal communication, of looking into the eyes of someone. If you're talking to your partner and he's not looking back at you, you're going to ask him to stop what he's doing and pay attention. You do that to your kid as well, you know, look at me when I'm talking to you. So we know how important it is to gaze into someone's eyes. And the next question. How often do we do that? Now, where 1, we don't do it at all, ever. And 5, we're doing it all the time. We're very much conscious of that. We know that it's important, but how often do we do it? Now, the results go a bit lower. It's always like this. we are very much aware that sometimes, but we try our best. But the thing is that we are only human. You can only focus a number of things at the same time, and the care context is very intense. There are a lot of variables, and my brain is very limited. Mine particularly is. So I can only cope with certain number of inputs that it's given, and it can only retain and interpret certain amount of information. So if I'm caregiving with a person who's very intense, in an environment that is very intense, with a technique that is very complex, my brain is going to struggle to focus on everything that is going on. And naturally, because of the task orientation, many times the relationship stays behind. That's why we do kind of a monitoring of this. This is what the results show, is that we see that in the same amount of time, so you see that the amount of time, the average that we take to care for people is roughly the same. We do say is that the intentionality of the gaze increases. So we actually gaze into the eyes of the patients much more with Humanitude, because we bring back the value of that and bring that to the attention of the caregivers. Also, the verbal communication is increased, because verbal communication is fed on feedback. If you're talking to people that do not answer back to you, or when they answer something that it's not very coherent, we naturally tend to stay quiet. That's what humans do. We don't talk to strangers. We don't talk to people that don't answer back. If you say hello to your neighbor once, he doesn't answer. If you say it twice, he doesn't answer. If you the third time, maybe you're not going to say hello anymore. It's how it works. But then we bring back to the idea of the caregivers that people are not talking to us, not because they're not wanting us or they don't like us. It's maybe they cannot talk to us the way that we were expecting them to. But that does not mean that they are not there and that they don't need this communication. And again, the touch. Most of the times the touch we do is a touch that is what we call instrumental, that it's a useful touch. It's something that I need to do with the person, with the body of the person. But to be honest, humans are built for pleasure, and humans need to be touched in a pleasant way. We all love our pettings, our hugs, our massages. Of course, right now it's very awkward. These times are very strange with this pandemic. We're told to keep our distance, but surely more than ever, we can tell how much we miss contact, how much we miss interaction, to talk to people, how much we miss to feel noticed and to engage with someone. But the truth is that if you increase these pillars, the gaze, the speech, the touch, in a positive manner, what we do see right away is a reduction of the aggressive, the combative behavior. So, and the acceptance of care, which is a big problem in healthcare setting, it just turns around. Because the thing is, if you plan your treatment, if you line it out, if you do your best and you think ahead and you go with your best love to be delivered in your care, which is usually what caregivers do. If the resident tells me no, I find it personal. I find it very offensive, because I'm giving my best. I gave you my best thought. I put my heart out for you, and what you say is no. Then I feel attacked personally. And not only that, I feel attacked personally, and I cannot fulfill my job. So I feel maybe even frustrated, maybe even incompetent. And along the way, I will quit doing that. I might even stop providing care altogether. I might even change my profession because of this. And it's very unfair, because this is not a matter of heart. It's not a matter of love. It's a matter of efficacy, of efficiency, of techniques, put it like that. And if I have that, I can do it. I faced this struggle myself as a caregiver, to be honest. I was already running away from being a caregiver by the time I found Humanitude, because within 3 or 4 years of practice, all I got was no's. And I mean, how can I start to challenge myself? Am I a good caregiver if all I get is no's? Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe I don't have what it takes. And it turns out that it wasn't my fault. It just, I didn't know enough. And fortunately, I learned it in time. And sometimes we get challenged with like, but why do we need another idea? Because sometimes this is healthcare context is all about innovation, isn't it? So every week there's a new wave, there's a new idea coming along. And we say that we actually need Humanitude, because if we didn't need Humanitude, these problems wouldn't be there. So if we have care refusal, combativeness, maladaptive syndromes within our communities, then we certainly are not able to fulfill our role, our values, the things we really want to do for our patients. We want them to be cared for. We want them to be happy. We want them to be relaxed. We want them to be alive, to be healthy. And if we see all these problems, obviously there's space for improvement. On the other hand, and this is why I found that Humanitude was quite interesting to me, is that we are not talking just about the residents. We're talking about the caregivers. Because how can I be a good caregiver if I'm not good, if I don't feel good myself? So the thing is that if I'm a caregiver and if I'm feeling stressed, if I'm dissatisfied, if I'm burned out, if I'm not motivated, what is the quality of my care? How can I be a good caregiver if I'm feeling overburdened with my job? So obviously there's also a lot of room for improvement on that way. And really what we're trying to do is to turn this around. Because what we do know is that if we do things without unwillingly, without knowing, we can do great damage without knowing. So the example I use is, imagine that I'm a father, my son is starting to walk, there's risk to it, he can fall, he can hurt himself, and I love him very much, I have a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry him on my lap everywhere. I'm going to take him everywhere he wants, because I'm a good father, I love him very much. But the fact is that I'm not really being a good father. I'm not allowing him to grow. I'm not allowing him to develop, to learn through his mistakes, through his pains. So to be a good caregiver is sometimes not to do. And this is very difficult for caregiving, because it's very ethical and very tough decisions. But we have to stand up to the cause. We need to understand where are our limits, and where should we go and where shouldn't we go. I'd like you to you don't have to close your eyes because I blacked out the video. I'd just like you to listen to this clip and kind of try to picture what's happening. You know, try what comes into your mind when you hear this. Did you guys hear it? What do you think is this? It's a shower. So if you ask anyone on the street, they might tell you that it's an attack, it's a crime, I don't know, it's a robbery, I don't know. But if we are caregivers, many of you, if you're caregivers, you right away identified, oh, that's a shower. You know, because we are familiar with those screens, unfortunately. And if you think of it, you see, we will see what's happening with image. Maybe it's easier to clarify. So what do we see? We don't see anything special, really. I mean, we see a nurse looking in the eye. We see a nurse holding the hand and a lady screaming. So something that we might think like, oh yeah, sure, I do that all the time, and still we get these results. And why is it? We don't really know. We don't understand what's happening. We don't have the context here. So we cannot really be very tough on this situation. Something I'd like to announce is that, okay, we have the authorization to use these videos and for training purpose, but please do not take print screens, do not put it online. I don't think it's ethical enough for us to be sharing these images unwillingly to the whole world. Let's keep some respect. Thankfully, we are the people that gave us the consent. They were very brave, because imagine these nurses, they had to kind of admit defeat, and this lady and her family had to accept that this would be useful for other caregivers to understand how not to happen. Fortunately, we were able to turn this around, and this situation finished as ended. This lady was able to take showers on the next day, actually, very happy enough. the thing is that in this situation, no one's happy. Okay, this is why we need Humanitude. This old lady, she's suffering. She's in agony. And these nurses, they are suffering as well, because sometimes the community says, oh yeah, because the nurses, because the caregivers, they don't have heart, they don't have what it takes. It's not true. That's not fair. We just don't have, we don't know any better. We're trying our best. They're being very kind. I don't see any aggression here. I don't see any rudeness in it. Japanese people are so respectful towards their elderly, but still this happens because there are traps along the way. Relationship is very difficult, especially with people that don't understand what we mean. And therefore, sometimes we get caught in these traps and we don't know what to do and we don't realize what we did wrong. Sorry, continue. What if we could care for people like this? Let's see how this lady actually.
はい。
枕のとこまでいらないよ。
本当？お手伝いできますよ。
そうね。
Voilà. Vous allez voir. 楽に寝てて上手に。
Ici, voilà. On va vous remonter avec le drap.
はい、上に上がりますね。上にも。ベッドの上の方に。
わい、バンザー。
Okay, so there's hope. Okay. The thing is, we need to start adjusting our practices to make sure that we do what we say we want to do. Many times the defended values, what we put out to the world, we struggle to put it in practice. It's not because we don't want it, it's because we don't know how, we don't know any better. And it's normal to even feel a bit skeptical on these presentations. It's like, yeah, sure, that's very easy to put up a couple of videos, but I can be the whole day showing you videos like this. And that's the annoying part, because we do get these results consistently. We were very fortunate to find the right partner in US. The Welsh communities have the right values underneath it. They say that they want to create happiness by providing the finest living experiences everywhere. And so all we have to do is to align the sparkle, to make it all go into the right place. We have the right values, and now we need to adjust the practices to meet those values. And that's what the Japanese call the Humanitude way, the Humanitude path, the Humanitude do, like Judo, like Taekwondo. It's all about the going that way. I know you have some questions in here. I'm thinking maybe I will keep them to the end. I didn't do a very long presentation to give time for this, and I think this makes the intervention more back and forth. I would like to hear you guys as well. So again, in Coelch, just before I managed to leave the US, we did this kind of brief presentation for the administration, for the board, for the employees of Coelch, and we realized that in the 12 people selected for the training, see how 8 of them were combative, see how 7 of them had verbal agitation. Sorry, 7 were combative, 7 verbal agitation. All of them refused care. All of them refused care. And the most problem was with hygiene, toileting, transfers, and walking. Okay. So the first day of care, so we have a 4-day training. The first day we are in class giving the basic tools to go into care and achieve the results. So the first day we managed to achieve the goals to 92% of the residents. Okay. The second day we went to 100%. And the third day we had a step back because probably one of the residents did not agree with what we had proposed, because every day we stepped up on the objective of care. So the first day maybe just a small goal, the third day it's really go crazy. And see how the neuropsychiatric symptoms, the prevalence before and after. Okay, no medication. This is all non-pharmacological intervention. This is all relationship techniques. And yes, we do get these results day in, day out. And we many times think that the secret is in the techniques. But to be honest, the results, the long-lasting results, the long-term results are more fulfilling if you actually embed the Humanitude philosophy into the organizational culture, where every caregiver that steps in that door actually knows what he's doing and is doing it for the right reasons. Because again, we can do a lot of things not knowingly, unwillingly, and be harming the patient, even though it's our best intention. So we have Humanitude pillars, and we have techniques for each one of these pillars. So we have gaze, we have speech, we have touch, we have verticality. And obviously, these help us to get in touch with the patient, to get them to consent care, to get them to cooperate care, and achieve the results that I've just shown you. Also, it's not just about making the person understand us, it's also us understanding the person, and it's also making the person believe that they have what it takes to perform that care. And that also implies that we caregivers, we dare to dream, we dare to believe, because sometimes we are so surrounded by negativeness, by problems, by disease, by deterioration, by loss. And it's hard for us to believe that there is still life, that there is still hope. But many times there is life, and there is hope, and there is results. But as a great teacher of mine, I must do an homage, Nidia Salgueiro, the first nursing teacher to do research in Portugal. I was lucky enough to work very closely with her. She just turned 85, so she's she's my case study as well. She taught me once that sometimes we go through the garden and we don't even see the flowers. And sometimes in health and sometimes in caregiving, it is like this. We are always looking for the macroscopic results, and sometimes we have the little smile and we don't even care for that. So it is something that we should look on, the little positives and little good things we collect along the way. We have the sensory capture, which is a relational procedure. We actually managed to identify the stages of a relationship and actually categorize them and give them a sequence for us to follow and to achieve the results more consistently. Again, because caregivers are so task oriented. I mean, when I say caregivers, I'm talking about myself as well. Okay, I'm not being prejudiced at all. And because we are very task oriented, it's good for us to have a procedure, because like this, we know we have something to hold on to. It's not about vocation. It's not about being born into it. Very few of us are born into caregiving. To joke with it a little bit, I tend to ask, when you're finding your way, when you're about 5-6 years old, and people are asking you what you're going to be when you grow up, how many of us answer that I'm going to be a caregiver, I'm going to be a nurse, or I'm going to be a psychologist, or I'm going to be especially in a geriatric field. Okay, some of us did say that, oh yeah, I'd like to be a nurse because I saw the health center, or because I love babies. But how many of us said, I'm going to be a caregiver for people who work, for people who have advanced age, who have a cognitive deterioration? It's very rare. Of course, there's always a few, but it's very rare. And if we only depend on vocation, we don't have enough caregivers. That's another fact. So we need to learn this. And these are the stages that we have. Of course, everything has its own specificity. Into detail, to give you an idea, we have a PhD done on sensory capture, and just the first 2 stages, they have 16 behaviors that happen, relational behaviors that we should adopt when approaching a person. And we know that those 16 behaviors, they happen on average within 40 seconds. So within 40 seconds of interaction, it is fast enough for us to use 16 relational behaviors. And just those 16 behaviors already reduce the probability of refusal of care by 70%. So they say that we don't judge by the book, but first impressions do count. So 40 seconds are enough for the person to say if they want us to help them or not. And of course, then it's all the coherence within care. And when we finish care, we have to have moments to make sure that the person values what happened, and we try to imprint good, positive emotional memory. Because regardless of the deterioration, of the cognitive deterioration, if you're talking of people with some form of dementia, the emotional memory always remains on the long-term care, on the long-term memory. So we should try to imprint some long-term memories, and positive ones preferably. We can also look at Humanitude as just a relational handling tool, in a way that we have people to transfer, we have people to position, we have people to mobilize, and we have a good number of techniques for that. And mind you that they all happen with tenderness. They never force. So one of the rules of art we have is no forced care. We cannot force the person to do anything, and we cannot force ourselves to do anything. Otherwise, we're just going to end up hurting the resident or ourselves. We can also look at Humanitude for the care management, because we have managed to develop some tools for supervised care, to observe care, to identify the origin of agitation, the origin of the problems of the refusal of care, and also tools for care prescription to make the team more aligned. What we do see sometimes is that the care can be very dysfunctional, because everybody does what they think it's best, but not necessarily what people think it's best is actually what the person feels that it's best. And we all have that example to tell that story, that everybody went in and the lady wouldn't get up for anyone, and then some colleague came and they got the person up. And we asked them, okay, but what did you do? Because 5 of us went before you and we didn't get the results. So what did you do? And the colleague tells you very naturally that, oh, I talked to the lady. Yeah, well, I talked to her as well, but what did you say? How did you say it? What was the fluency? What was the keyword? And sometimes we didn't realize this. So when we go into the training, we also try to find those keywords. We try to find those, what we call relational hints. Those relational hints, many times they're either not known, or when they're known, they are not passed through. Because who am I to teach other colleagues to how to approach that person? There's a bit of a prejudice to this, a bit of a shame to this, and therefore sometimes the best practices are not shared. We're many times punished by the mistakes we do, but not necessarily appreciated by the results we achieve. So we should focus more on the solutions, on the results, and not so much on the mistakes, because those we are all prone to do sooner or later. Also, we can look at it into a change management tool. Humanitude, when it's used to be embedded on the organizational culture, it makes wonders. We have by now about 30 organizations in the world that have been certified as Humanitude units. These are the 6 criterion that we promote. We say that a Humanitude unit has an organizational culture towards the well-being and of the care staff and the residents, that there's no forced care at all, but also no abandoned care, which means that I do not force anyone to do something, but I do not abandon them because they refuse care. I have to find other alternatives, other care, other people, other times, other solutions to ensure that the care goal is achieved. Also, I respect for individuality and privacy, because each person is unique and this is their home. I need to make sure that everything they do and they feel welcome and they feel at ease. People live and die standing, which means that people should be vertical, should be moving, should be used, and should feel like a person until the end. Because verticality is not just the sense of the body, it's also the sense of the soul. When we stand up, we feel more able, we feel more brave, we feel more confident. Open to the outside, because it's not a prison. I know that now it's weird to talk about this, and the ethical discussions are huge all over the world because of this, because of the isolation and the confinement. But we know that how painstakingly it is to close down our communities, and we know the consequences of that. So we should be open to the outside. We should welcome guests, and obviously be respectful towards each other. But yeah, it's something that we consider an important principle. Another thing is a place of life, a place of desires. We do not talk about needs. We talk about a project of life. People do not actually have only biological needs. They have social needs, they have emotional needs, they have cultural needs, they have so many needs. But more than a need, they have wishes, they have desires. I do not need to eat. I love to eat. So this is something that we need to turn around our terminology. What do people want when they come in here? What is their project? What is their life project? And something to find out and to fulfill. It's our duty. And yeah, inside each criteria we have We have items that can be checked, like to do an audit, and after by average it's a 2-day audit, we're able to say that you are a Humanitude unit or not. We are healthcare professionals. We can be professionals or we can be family caregivers. Okay, the demands are different. Obviously, we have to address the things differently. But since I'm talking to a wider public, just to make clear that we have those two forms of caregiving. The attachment is very different from both of them. But what's something we realize is that if you are promoting the quality of life of your resident, of your family member, then something we need to know is that as a caregiver, we can only do good and we cannot do any harm. Okay, this is a basic Hippocrates oath already a long time ago, done in the ancient Greece. And what we do know is that sometimes when people became more frail, you probably remember this. I don't know if you remember the first time that you were away from your parents' home and you got ill, you got a flu or something like that. The first thing we did was almost to call mommy, right? As if mommy could do anything for us. Probably not, but on the moment of frailty, of vulnerability, we look for our loved ones. We look for the close ones. And naturally, as we grow older, those loved ones, they become further and further apart. Some of our friends have their own life. Sometimes we lost already our partner. Our kids have their own life. And if I move into a community, I get less and less interaction, mind you. But it's not that I don't see anyone. Of course I do see, but the meaning, the value of those interactions can be very little for me. And naturally, what happens is that I start feeling more and more lonely, even though I have a lot of people around me. And we talk about solitude more than isolation. I can have a lot of people around me and I still feel lonely. And some people, then they go into what we call a geriatric limbo, which is they are alive, they are with us, the heart is beating, but it's as if they are not anymore. They don't talk to us, they don't gaze at us, they refuse care, or if they receive care, they are just recipients. They're not active on it, they're very passive on it. And sometimes these patients, if we actually improve the interaction that we're having with them with Humanitude techniques, we see changes that we would not believe. I have a couple of videos that I would like to show you because I think images are better. So this is a lady who has been, the family asked me to go and provide care to her because she has been just deteriorating. She's been to the hospital a couple of times. There's nothing they find really wrong pathologically, but she's just going downhill. So the family asked me to provide care to see what could I do for her.
Vou destapá-la, está bem? Com licença. Isso. Levantar esta perna, consegue? Dona Anita, consegue levantar esta perna? Aqui, esta que eu estou a mexer. É a esquerda. Levantar. Levantar. Levantar assim. Isso. Segurar cá em cima. Segurar. Isso mesmo. Boa. E a outra? E a outra, a esquerda, levantar. Isso mesmo. Boa, muito bem. Vou tirar esta almofada. Se calhar convém arranjar umas perguntas porque elas podem agora um bocadito. Levantar esta mão. Com licença. Vamos rodar para mim. Olha aqui. Esta perna, dobrá-la. E virar para cá. Assim. Para cá. Isso mesmo assim. Isso mesmo assim. Ok? Está?
Tá bom?
Isso. Isso mesmo. Muito bem, dona Anita. Muito bem. Vamos endireitar. A cabeça está boa? Ou está à roda? A cabeça está boa? Montar a roda. Vamos ver, olha aqui, levantar. Levantar. Isso. Foi antes aqui. Preciso do comando para baixar.
Olá, tia.
Bom dia. Bom dia. Já fala comigo. Bom dia.
Olá, tia. Bom dia.
É a sua sobrinha.
Bom dia. Que bom vê-la sentada. Posso lhe dar um beijinho?
Olha, um beijinho.
So the same lady 1 week
São
later,
bonitas?
Muito linda.
Muito lindas, pois são, muito.
Muito linda.
the team decided to take the matter into their own hands. They flooded the lady with Humanitude.
Vamos lá, outra. Oh, Dona Anitta, está a saber bem, não está?
Bem.
Muito bem. Olha aqui, deixa eu ver a mão.
I go back to see her.
Muito melhor. Quem a viu e quem a vê. Sim.
And she
Eu é
thanks
que
me.
agradeço. Eu é que agradeço o facto de estar cá connosco.
And this is the same lady.
Ai, desculpa.
Está ali não, mas
Tá bom, a sopa. Serra fria, olha a sopa.
Oh, Dona Anitta, o que é que disse? O que é que disse?
muito obrigada.
Pronto. Obrigado eu. Tá?
Obrigado.
So this is what we call a third birth. It's a person who was with us. Eventually, she went into a geriatric limbo. She went away. She went into her own world. She was alive, but she wasn't with us. She had no will to live anymore. And we managed to find her. We managed to convince her to come back to us because we proved her that we care, that we loved her. And we did that not by our actions, but by our word, by our gaze, by the way we touched her, by our free acts. You saw the amount of flowers that they gave to the lady and the kisses that she got. Another video, this one in Japan, kind of the same way. And when we work with people, we have to understand that for a person to feel alive, to keep this motivation, it's not a speck of quality. It's a vital obligation of caregiving. It's as maybe more important than eating. If you're not well, you don't want to eat, you don't want to live, and you can do all the interventions you wish for, the best ones in the world, the highest technology, and still get no results. So we have to go back to the basics to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the right person at the right time. Obviously, for the untrained eye, we cannot really see much difference sometimes in what's happening. But believe me, those two videos are full of techniques that I could just be stopping the video in every second and explaining you why are we doing it like this, and we're touching here in this manner, and it's all too complex, and that's why we have a 4-day training. It's not in an hour that I'll be able to explain you all that. I think this hour serves the purpose for you to realize that there are solutions out there. There is hope out there. There is life out there. There is really, really good care out there. More and more we're coming into Coel strongly. If it wasn't for these restrictions, we would have been there already a couple of times this year. So we're hoping that this all clears up for us to go back and keep up with the good work. But sure, the seed is planted already. So if you have any questions, go back to Benjamin, go back to Quelch. and do your own research. There's already some things being posted out, and don't take my word for it. I'm biased. Okay. But the truth is that it did save my life as well. I was quitting caregiving, and I did not like the job that I was doing because I did not see myself doing that kind of care forever. And right now I'm very happy. I'm probably one of the luckiest person on the planet. I get to care for people who are the most pleasing. They are referenced as the worst, and they're always the best. You know, so you always get the best gifts from them. This is what I had for you. I know there's this is blinking a lot. There's a lot of questions, so I'm hoping that we manage to answer them. I have more videos, I have more slides, but I think it's better to have it like this. If you have any question, please let me know, and I'll try to answer them all.
Hey, John, I do have a few questions. Not from me personally, but from some of our guests today. First question that came in, and thank you, by the way.
You're welcome.
Very
Thank you.
generous in sharing this today. I know it's late over there where you are in Portugal, so thank you for being up this late to be with us.
No problem. No, not that late. You know, we delay everything with a siesta.
That's right. That's right. So the first question that came in was, what do you recommend for people who are blind and may have trouble receiving the gaze, and those who are deaf and are not going to be able to hear the speech? Any other thoughts about that?
Yeah. So the thing is, regardless of our ability, because sometimes it's a sensory handicap that we have. You know, we're blind, but I've had the chance to work with people who were blind, and they gave me the feedback of a couple of things. First of all, is that not all blind people are fully blind. Okay. And another thing is the direction of the voice. They can see where your voice is coming from. And another thing that I didn't explain, but it's important for us to know, how did we learn that we should be gazed, that we should be talked to, we should be touched in a certain manner? It was because as we were growing up, we had good experiences with people that did that to us. Initially our parents, and then our friends, and then our loved ones. And we learned that if someone cares for us, they're gonna gaze us, they're gonna talk to us in a certain manner, they're gonna touch us in a certain manner. It's not because I'm blind that my mother did not love me. And it's because I'm blind, I did not get a chance of seeing my mother gazing at me, but she did gaze me with the same intention and the same intensity as she would if the son wasn't blind. So what means is that he learned that if a person cares for him, the person will be front to them. So of course he's not going to realize if I'm in face to face and I'm looking the other way, he cannot tell that, but he tells me that if you come to me, if you lower yourself, you put yourself in the same level as I am, and you talk to me from the face, I know you want something from me. I know you care for me. I don't see you. I don't see you gazing me, but I know you care. So this was a very good feedback that I had, because it was first person. So what I say, everybody, regardless of if the people see or not, we always try to adjust our gaze to make sure that at least we do our part and we convey this message, this emotional message to the person that we care. Another thing that you asked was about the speech and the hearing impairment. The hearing impairment, again, it depends from the level. If it's full deafness, then there doesn't make any difference, the tone of voice or the type of words they do, because of mouth lip reading, so be careful. But the tone of voice, not so much. If a person hears, the tone of voice is very, very key. Even today, I got a chance, I had to go grocery shopping. It's one of the few excuses we have over here to get out of the house. And actually, I saw the security addressing the person to keep the social distance, and he was absolutely right, but he did it in a certain manner that he was perceived as rude by the client. And so what did he say? He could say exactly the same thing and not be rude. It's all about the tone of voice, you know, the way I speak to you. So when a person has a speech impairment, naturally, what humans try to do is they try to raise their volume. Okay, if you cannot hear me, then I'm gonna speak louder to you, right? But if I speak louder to you, naturally, I'm going to increase my high-pitched notes. And then I'm perceived as being aggressive. And what we have to make sure is that our tone of voice does not change regardless of the volume. I can make sure that I can speak a bit more louder, a bit more clearly as well, because it's not just about the volume, it's about the speed, it's about the amount of information, it's about the words that I use. But I make sure that I increase my volume like I'm doing right now, making sure that I do not raise my high-pitched notes, because those are the problem. Okay, again, this is something that you can train. Actors train to speak to a larger audience without distorting their voice. So it's something that we can learn as well. Another thing are the tools that we managed to see. There was one video with a Japanese flexible man that they had the cone to speak to him. So it's latest technology. You know, you roll up a bit of paper and you just speak to the ear of the person. You try to be inventive as well. And nowadays you have that amazing device you showed me. What is it called?
Eversound, yeah.
The Eversound. We have so many solutions by now. It's just a matter of us to kind of think outside the box. Make sure is the tone of voice, not because the person doesn't hear you. Do not increase your tone of voice. Otherwise, the moment they do hear you, they're going to think you're being rude. Okay.
Gotcha. I just had a question come through. Will this be available afterwards? And yes, at least for a week or so, it's being streamed live on YouTube right now. So if you go to the Culture Community's YouTube channel, you can find this. Now, we have a few more questions, but I do want to be very careful to keep our promise that we kept this to an hour. So we will stay over for a few minutes answering some questions, but many of you may need to get back to work, get back to appointments and things like that. So if you need to go, please feel free to drop off the call. In the chat box, I did put livingwellevents.org/insights, livingwellevents.org/insights. That is the website to go to if you're interested in receiving any follow-up information that might be given after this from our guests today, or if you want to enter the drawing. Either way, please go there. Now, quick note from my own work with John as a social gerontologist specializing in dementia. I've spent a lot of time thinking about researching dementia trainings and been to quite a few myself. And when people first hear John in America, a lot of times the response I get is, oh yeah, this is great. It sounds like what we've been teaching for the past 40 years. Look in people's eyes, talk to them kindly, make sure that you touch people. Like we've been talking about this for 40 years, right? The difference that I've seen is in almost all the trainings I've gone to is that we don't show typically in America memorizable, immediately relevant technique. We give people the principle, we give people the here's what you should be doing. And a lot of us believe, well, of course, I'm a nice person. I look at people, I can speak kindly. And we think we can just go into a very hard situation where people are throwing shit at us in the shower and immediately practice all of those tools. But the reality is, unless we practice them the same way a chef might practice cutting a vegetable over and over and over again, very specifically, or the way a car mechanic might practice how to get 10 cars done in an hour, right? Using specific techniques. Same thing with care. We have to have technique that's memorizable, that's a procedure, that's a protocol, that puts these things that we think are just normal human behavior into something that can be learned and practiced and measured. And that's what Humanitude does very differently than a lot of things I've seen. Would you agree with that, John?
I think I have to. It's not no, I'm kidding. Yeah, that's what convinced me. I'm very pragmatic. I am very critical. I'm a caregiver. It's you either show me or it's out the window. Mm-hmm. And when I went to France, this was the challenge I had to leave, because I saw the same presentation within 1 hour, kind of roughly the same thing. And okay, that's all very pretty, but that's not what I see. The videos I shown, the pretty ones. How often do you get to see that? You know, that miracle wondering that suddenly they get up and walk and talk and eat for themselves and they do the splits. You know, it's not rarely happens. But in a training, on a normal training, that happens like at least with 2 out of 10 people. So it is very, very consistent. And this is what I went to see. Yeah, it's very down to earth. It's really, this is how you do it. It's not babble. It's not talk. You know, you walk the walk.
Another question that came in was, does sitting in a wheelchair count as verticality if someone has been, let's say, bedbound? Do you count that, or not until they're actually standing for at least 20 seconds per standing period? Do you count that as verticality?
Again, like, it's not black and white. We have a scale. So best is like you and me, we can stand up for as long as we can. Worst case scenario is people have to stay horizontally for medical condition, for end of life care, for refusal of care. What we do see is that 4% of the residents is the prevalence of bedriddency. Okay, so which is quite low. If you go into any geriatric setting, you're going to see that the bedriddency tends to be quite high, usually above 30%, which is not a good indicator. Should be below, around 4%, with some deviation in between. Again, sitting up is as close as it is to be horizontal. So it's not good enough. But of course, if that's all you can do by now, yeah, this is already something. However, what we do see is that if you work in prevention, we actually get more than 90% people standing up to the end of their life. They only get bedridden, or they only stay in bed. They're not really bedridden, but the benefits of standing up do not pay off until the last week of their life. So the Humanitude units are keeping an eye on this indicator, and we see that on average, people go to bed for their last 5 days. Okay, so the majority, and I mean, a big number, I don't want to say in absolute terms, but above 90% of the geriatric care should be standing up, not even sitting up, standing up. But yeah, you need techniques for that as well, and you need a mindset for that. Not just the techniques, a mindset. Everybody needs to be kind of going the same way. It's not just one person in the ward that's going to make miracles. It's the whole team. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another question that came through was, does this work with people with intellectual disabilities, not just people with neurocognitive disorders, but intellectual disabilities?
Yes, of course. We actually have very good results with people with intellectual disabilities. Surprising results with people with autistic spectrum, which we were kind of afraid of because of the hypersensitivity to the input, to the relationship inputs. But very good results are coming in from Japan with this dedicated population, you know, with less fits, with easier interaction from the parents. So very surprising. We have a chance of working with people with disabilities, from motor to blind to deaf to the ones that we've been struggling the most, and the condition is very difficult, is the blind deaf people. It's fortunately enough, it's not so many people with this disability, but when they do, there are right away 2 pillars that are absent. What we do say is that the pillars are very emotional, so you don't need a big cognition to understand them and to enjoy them, to appreciate them. So intellectual disability works very well with Humanitude, yeah. Or Humanitude works very well with people with disabilities, with intellectual disabilities. Yeah.
This next question is a bit of a large topic, and we could probably do a whole seminar on this, but top of mind, some folks are asking, is there any way that you're recommending modifications of some of these techniques during this pandemic, when people are concerned about how close we get to someone's face, or how much we're touching their body? Any modifications?
Yeah, we are. Of course, you have to have protective gear. You have to actually increase the quality of the interaction, because this social distancing is actually leading to a sensory privation, to a socially privation that has very, very high damage. I mentioned briefly, the ethical discussion here is, where are the benefits of the biological benefits? Do they meet to the social damage, to the emotional damage? To give you a brief reference, back in the Blitz, when London was bombarded back in the Second World War, children were taken away from their families to countryside to spare them. The ones that stayed against the government's recommendation The kids that stayed in London, they stayed with trauma from the bombing. So with the loud noises, they had trauma. But the kids that were taken away from the family had more emotional trauma than those kids that stayed for the bombing, which means that we are a social animal, as we like it or not. And we need each other, and we need our loved ones, especially when the times are difficult. And right now the times are very, very difficult for everybody. And to put the people in such a social isolation, in such a social privation, it can be very damaging. So what we're saying is that we should wear our protective gear, but our gaze should be more than ever important. Our touch should be more than ever important. As long as I have the protection gear and I use my washing and I use all the control. Another thing we're encouraging very much is free acts. We most of the times go to people because we want something from them. We have a care to provide. But now it's the moment to give compliments, to say that we care for them, that we love them. Bring flowers, bring candy, give smiles left and right, use them, keep them in your pocket. This is when people need it the most, because these are strange times. You all of a sudden, you don't come to visit, you don't talk to me anymore, or I don't recognize you. All of a sudden you're an alien to me. So I need this reference more than ever.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We also have a few folks who are asking about the qualifications to become a trainer of Humanitude. Can you speak to that for a moment? Are only nurses allowed to do that, or
no.
Who can be a trainer?
No, the trainer, usually we ask someone who has a caregiving background, who has a communication skills, because you're going to stand in front of the audience, and who's able to learn techniques, who's able to improvise, who's able to come up with solutions, because people sometimes are desperate and they're facing. Imagine you walk into a community and you challenge people to say, okay, where's the problem? Like, tell me from here, what's the person that is struggled the most with? And of course, people are going to be like, oh, great, we're going to give him this and that, and so we are on the front line, So I tend to joke a little bit, There's Cristiano Ronaldo, and then there's a Humanitude trainer right there, So it has to be very, very. I don't know how to put it, but yeah, you have to be very, very sharp and very fast on your feet, But and hands-on, it's not just the talks, you actually have to show how it's done, because this is where people are going to believe you. This is where your credibility comes from. Okay. But no, it's not just nurses. We have psychologists, physiotherapists, social occupational therapists. We have doctors. There are trainers in France, so we have a lot of
all different types.
Backgrounds.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Currently, from the way I understand it, in the United States, the best option is if you happen to be in a city where Kelsch has a community, and most of you on this call probably are, because you were invited by a friend who works for Kelsch. We will be hosting over the next year in most major cities. John or one of his colleagues will be coming to do a more in-depth training. Typically, they're spending 4 days with our staff, 12 of our staff, and then he'll do an evening presentation and a Friday 6 to 8 hour presentation that's more in depth. And so that's a great first step for people who are interested in learning more about becoming a trainer, is to come to one of those opportunities. We're kind of in a time right now, John, if I'm not correct, where there's only 2 or 3 English-speaking trainers in the world in Humanitude. So we do need people who are willing to go through the year-long process to become a trainer and really commit to that. Because the US, there's just not enough English speakers. They're all speaking Asian languages or European languages, and just don't speak English. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I was going to say that actually the right time. We're always looking for locals to actually take over, because regardless of our skill, there are certain cultural aspects that are always different. So care in Japan and the society in Japan is different from the one in Europe, and it's different from the one in US. And there's always, even though we're all humans, we're all people, and we all have the same background. And Humanitude, that's why Humanitude works worldwide. But then there are certain cultural aspects that need to be taken into consideration, and a local trainer is always more qualified than any European trainer that will go into the US. So yeah, very welcome.
Wonderful. Well, hey, John, you know, I've kept you long enough. Thank you for being with us
thank
today.
you. Yeah.
So happy to have you. It's good to be with you.
It's very tough to do it online. I know the attention span is really difficult. I know. I'm sorry if I bored you with my rants. I'm tend to be as transparent, as honest as I can. I hope I didn't step over the line in any things I said. Sometimes I just go and I just don't even know what I say. So yeah.
No, I will send you the chat transcript afterwards, John, so you can see how many people are very thankful for you staying up late to talk to us.
Thank you. And if there's my email. If you have any question that you think it wasn't answered, please send me an email. Can be it's actually my name @gmail.com if you want. It's easy enough without all the dots and the tills and all that, you know. It's all very hieroglyphic, you know, but just straightforward, just the letters all together @gmail.com, and it's gonna come to me. And if you go to the website in humanitude.fr or .pt, there are certain things as well. I think I have some articles as well published in English, so I think there's also contacts there. I mean, just look for me. I'm out there.
Wonderful. Well, hey, thank you everyone for attending, and I will put that screen up one more time for you so you can go ahead and check that out.
That lovely one with my mustache, isn't it?
Well, this is the website if anybody wants to receive any follow-up information after this event, as well as your contact information. We'll be sure to send it over to anybody who goes here and fills this out. You'll get John's contact information directly, resources, the replay of this event today. So again, thank you, John. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you for having me over, and thank you everyone for being there. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
I hope so, yeah.